Bob Mueller's indictment of Russians interfering in the election clarifies what many have suggested, that while the Russian operation had many goals, when it came to the specific campaigns, they supported two major party candidates, Trump and Bernie Sanders. The indictment alleging Russians used information warfare to support Sanders and Trump. Now, the story in this indictment is honestly so detailed, much of it still hasn't sunk in as of tonight. And apart from Donald Trump, the new facts in here about the 2016 Democratic primary are important. Mueller showing for the first time that the Russian strategy to boost Trump and Sanders was set early in the primaries when both candidates won their first primaries. This was the scene in New Hampshire on February 9th.
One-time long shot Bernie Sanders crushed Hillary Clinton.
We harnessed the energy and the excitement that the Democratic Party will need to succeed in November.
Trump trouncing the field, beating second-place John Kasich by more than 50,000 votes.
I love you all. Thank you, New Hampshire. Thank you.
The very next day, we now know, Russian planners ordered their operatives to criticize Clinton and the other candidates, quote, except Sanders and Trump. We support them. That was going on at the beginning of the primary race. This was like literally the day after the first primary. Think about that. On the same day that Americans are waking up to headlines about who won the first primaries, Russians are giving their orders to support those two candidates. And that early start has not been the conventional narrative about Russia's boost for Sanders. Take Bernie Sanders himself, who claims in a new interview Russians basically interfered at the end of his campaign.
Is that at the end of my campaign, when it appeared that Clinton was going to win, and certainly after she won the nomination, what the Russians were doing is flocking to Bernie Sanders' Facebook sites, and they were saying to Bernie Sanders supporters, if you voted for Sanders, you have to understand Hillary Clinton is crazy, she's a murderer, she is terrible, all kinds of horrible, horrible things about Hillary Clinton.
That may be how Senator Sanders remembers it. But now we know it began much earlier with those February marching orders. And the very next month, a Sanders volunteer, John Mattis, says a huge wave of fake news stories slamming Clinton from abroad targeted Sanders supporters. And he says he alerted a contact at the Clinton campaign about it, warning it was all an effort to suppress the votes of Sanders supporters in order to help Trump. By that summer, Clinton clinched the nomination, but the Russians weren't done. They routed hacked DNC emails to WikiLeaks, which did devastating political damage to Clinton at the very moment she was aiming to unite a fractured party.
We have got to elect Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine.
Sanders supporters began screaming his name, disrupting the program and shattering any illusions of party unity.
It was a mess. And Sanders called for the ousting of the DNC chair in response to those hacked emails. Here's how the New York Times reported the start of that convention. Democrats arrived at their nominating convention under a cloud of discord as Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the DNC chair, abruptly said she was resigning after a trove of leaked emails showed party officials conspiring to sabotage Bernie Sanders. The revelation, the Times reports, along with these pro-Sanders protests, threatened to undermine the delicate healing process that followed this fight between the two. And the day also veered extraordinarily into allegations that Russian leaks helped bring down the head of an American political party. Extraordinary veering. Sounds like a racetrack you don't want to be on. That was the Times report during it. To paraphrase an internet saying, Russian election interference comes at you fast. Now, people weren't sure what to make of WikiLeaks dropping those emails about alleged DNC bias against Sanders. WikiLeaks had broken other true stories over the years. And honestly, calm debate is more difficult in the heat of a bitter primary. Sanders supporters were genuinely upset about the content of the emails. But now we know the full extent of Russia's role. It is worth reflecting on how Russia did achieve its exact goal of Democratic division in that convention, and how the conventional narrative at the time, driven by political actors and, yes, the media, didn't always emphasize just how much that meltdown in Philadelphia was stoked by a foreign power.
thousands of leaked emails show Democratic Party officials possibly plotting against Bernie Sanders.
The latest emails released by WikiLeaks suggest that top officials at the Democratic National Committee plan to undermine Bernie Sanders.
A suspected Russian leak of embarrassing Democratic National Committee emails.
Some reporters did also press on Russia's role during the convention. NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell raising the point with Bernie Sanders' campaign manager, who didn't welcome Russians' help.
We've been told by the computer experts that there's a strong suspicion that the Russians were behind the original hack. Do you have concern about a foreign adversary trying to influence the election, potentially on behalf of Donald Trump, who has praised Vladimir Putin?
It is certainly a very, very disturbing. We certainly don't want foreign powers trying to influence U.S. elections. There's no doubt about that.
That was in the middle of that convention, and that's, of course, the right answer. As more came out after the election, more journalists dug into just how deeply this Russian operation exploited the Democratic primary battle.
They used automated social media bots and what appeared to be paid operatives in Russia and other countries, specifically to target Bernie supporters. They took the real split in the Democratic Party between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, and they blew it up into what they hoped would be an unbreachable chasm.
Now, Russia didn't create that chasm. The Democratic primary was already heated. But was everyone too quick to react to criminally stolen property exactly the way the Russians wanted? Was the press too excited about secret scoops to give voters the proper context? Were political leaders too happy to then seize on those scoops? You know, looking back on the election last year, at one point I did ask Senator Sanders about his call for the DNC chair to resign after Russia hacked the emails. You, among others, called for her to resign in part after those leaks. What we didn't fully know then that is so understood now is that those were partly operations of Russia. Did you, in a way, benefit from that, and would you do it differently then, knowing what we know now?
Well, knowing what we know now, doesn't help me figure out what I would have done back then. And the Russians cannot be allowed to get away with that stuff.
Did you know then that this might have been part of their design, was to leak these emails precisely so there would be more rifts in the Democratic Party?
What we knew is, well, of course we knew that. And of course we knew that they were trying to cause divisiveness within the Democratic Party. That's no great secret.
Of course we knew. But if we knew the extent of that Russian operation, wouldn't we all consider doing things differently? Look, I do get it. A lot of politicians, they don't like hypothetical questions because it seems like just another attempt at a gotcha moment. But this is important. Right now, we're living through an attack on our democracy. What we learn in hindsight can help with our foresight. No one's accusing Senator Sanders of being just like Trump because they both got name-checked by Russian operatives. The context is different. The Russians backed Trump to help Trump, and the Russians backed Sanders at the convention to hurt Clinton. In other words, to help Trump. The campaign behavior is also different. Sanders' staff not accused of meeting with Russians to get Oppo, and Bernie Sanders didn't respond to any of this news by brazenly asking Putin for help hacking his opponent's emails. When it came to Clinton's other email issue, her State Department email, Sanders even agreed that was a distraction.
The American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails.
So, let me state clearly, there is no equivalence there, period. But it is worth pressing both the candidates that Russia boosted in this operation, and it is worth questioning how all of us are going to deal with this ongoing weaponized information. I think it's a mistake to view this dilemma only through a partisan lens, as settling scores from an old primary or as a distraction from, yes, also the larger issue of Donald Trump's current Russia relationship. You know, when North Korea attacked Sony over that film, The Interview, it also would have been a mistake to narrow that debate as to whether The Interview was a great film. It wasn't. But I think the bigger question is, what should the U.S. do when foreign powers wage cyber war on American companies? And today the question is, what do we do when the cyber war is waged on our elections and our primaries? How do we navigate leaks that, on the one hand, they may expose real information, but they also are agitating for fake news and division. And how do we inoculate ourselves against those efforts and combat them while also retaining the combination of, I guess, of skepticism and good faith, which we need in a civic society? The Russians were interfering, again, just last month, back at it. They pushed that Republican campaign to, quote, release the memo. But now, brand new, Mueller is showing they spent 2016 pushing another campaign to elect Bernie Sanders. Now, neither of those facts automatically proves whether a given campaign is all good or all bad or something else. But we have to guard against a kind of a digital McCarthyism that falls into that kind of trap, and we have to guard against acting like this is all just old news that we've already figured out. We haven't. These Russian efforts, we're learning, were very effective, even when done on the cheap, and they're just getting started.
Mueller mentioned me twice, our campaign, twice in his report, and I think what he was talking about is kind of old news.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.